Hello, BookTube. Sorry once again for my absence for the last few days. I've been a little under the weather, but I'm back now on a cold and rainy day here in Boston. And I mentioned the other day that I wanted to start a book club, the Steve Tiberius Donahue Book Club. I wanted you to get infected with the Steve Tiberius Donahue Book Club. I mentioned that our first book would be this. It would be A Distant Mirror by Barbara Tuchman, a big, fat, 700-page history of the 14th century. Doesn't sound, to those of you who don't read history, very appetizing on the surface, but I assure you it is. I assure you that you will like it. It's a big ask in a month. That was brought home to me by a few people after I made my choice and my announcement. A few people pointed out to me that a book this size is, for a lot of people who have leveraged their time in a million different ways, really busy. For a lot of people, a book this size is the only thing they could read in a month. Even so, given that consideration, I have been just overwhelmingly pleased with the response that I've received for this book club. Quite a few people all over the world ordering their copies, reserving their copies, going out hunting for their copies, setting aside time to read this book with me. Now, and that response has been all the more heartwarming in the fact that I don't know what I'm doing. I know how to teach a book in a class. If this were an auditorium, I wouldn't have any trouble at all. And I know how to do a read-along. Well, what's a book club? Isn't it supposed to be more than a read-along? Isn't it supposed to have more interaction? I don't know how I'm going to work that out yet. There's still some time. It's still 2 weeks until February. So I don't quite know how that's going to work. Will we have a dedicated Voxer channel that's dedicated just to this book? I thought about that idea, but then I thought, would it get swamped with talking about George Santos, or whatever his name is? Would it get swamped with other things? And also, I don't know quite how to put this delicately. I also wondered the greater communal aspect of a book club. Brought to mind horror stories that people have told me about book clubs, about that one person at the book club who just won't shut up and won't let anybody else talk. And it's all voluntary, and you were all supposed to be friends, so there's no real good way to say to them, why don't you take a seat? Why don't you let other people do some talking without them getting offended? Things like that are horror to me. They're a stalking horror to me. I would do anything to avoid them. And maybe the way to avoid them is simply not to have that element. Maybe the way to avoid that is if not to avoid it altogether, then to limit it. So I do a video every week that we're reading The Distant Mirror, and there's lively conversation in the comments field, I would hope, and everybody's free to email me at any time, Voxer me at any time. And then at the end of the month, maybe I do a live stream about the book, where everybody who's been involved, I can try to aim for a time that'll work for everybody, and everybody can just chime in on what they thought. And in live streams, I haven't done one in way too long. I really need to do that. As soon as I have the energy, I will do that. But in live streams, I'm fairly okay with pruning wild pitches, with just getting rid of wild hairs in the discussion, especially if the live stream is supposed to have a focus. Then I'd be pretty okay with doing that in a way that I absolutely could not do in somebody's living room with the white wine already poured. I haven't quite hammered that out yet. Now that I'm back, I will recommence thinking about how we're going to do the Steve Tiberius Donahue Book Club. But in the meantime, you will have noticed, faithful BookTube watcher that you are, that book clubs are all the rage now. So I'm not the only one who thinks that it feels like there's a difference somehow between a book club and a read-along, even though I'm not 100% sure I could name those differences. It seems like there is a difference between them. Lots of people have proposed doing book clubs. They're all over the place now. One of the most recent announcements that also has been bombarded with positive response, just wonderful to see, and makes me think that the popularity of a book club on BookTube will be directly proportionate to how much the channel's viewers like the BookTuber. It could very well be. Michael Havon announced Roger's cheap old book club, Roger Hotep, is instrumental in the board in picking the choices for that book club. And that book club is taking an approach that I toyed with for a long time. I've always done it on my read-alongs, but I intentionally abandoned it for the Steve Tiberius Donoghue book club. And that is, Michael's picked only books that are in the common domain. So if you want, you can go to Project Gutenberg and get them for free. So that his book club is not putting any financial burden on you of any kind whatsoever. And that, of course, has enormous attractions for me, which is why I've done my read-alongs that way, so they don't strain anybody. I decided with this book club to take a chance and not do that, to pick a book that you would have to acquire somehow. You could put it on hold at your library. Holding onto it for a whole month might be difficult, but you could do that, or you could go and find a secondhand copy. I was lifted up a little with A Distant Mirror by the fact that I know that secondhand copies are extremely plentiful and can be extremely cheap. So I wasn't all that worried that people who really wanted to join wouldn't be able to. And also, with me, there's the ultimate backstop, which is that if you desperately want to be part of the Steve Tiberius Donoghue Book Club and you absolutely cannot acquire a copy of whatever book it is, I will acquire a copy for you and send it to you. With Michael's version, his book club, there's no need to think about that. These things are all free unless you are a weird holdout to ebooks. You can have it on your device in 2 seconds. And he's starting off with this. He's starting off with The Prisoner of Zenda by Anthony Hope. He even used this. This is the old Magnum Easy Eye edition. I don't know if you can make that out in this light. These old Magnum Easy Eye editions. This is the Magnum Easy Eye edition of The Prisoner of Zenda. I had this paperback once upon a time. I read it until it fell apart, which was about 30 pages because the Magnum Easy Eye editions, I love them dearly. You think I have only one. No, I have two. I have the Magnum Easy Eye edition of Hound of the Baskervilles, and I have the Magnum Easy Eye edition of Dracula, which I have just never been able to let myself get rid of. But I used to have them all. I used to have all of them. They were a wonderful, cheap, old reprint mass market paperback, all with original cover art, and they were delightful. They weren't well made. So they really weren't well made. I mean, even by the standards of the time, they were noticeably cheap. So they weren't going to last you. The Dracula one that I have, I don't know what is wrong with it, but it has managed to last, but most of the ones that I have didn't. My, what was it? Jude the Obscure practically exploded. But inspired by Roger's choice, I reread Prisoner of Zenda, and I'd forgotten so much about it. I'd forgotten so much about how enjoyable it was. And, of course, leave it to Michael K. Vaughan that every single choice, he gave his list for the whole year, far more ambitious than I am. I think I know what I want next month's to be, but I couldn't do a whole year, and not in a million years, no way. I wouldn't have done that anyway because I didn't know what the response would be. But he did his whole year, and every single choice on that list was either directly influenced by Edgar Rice Burroughs, a personal favorite of Edgar Rice Burroughs, or heavily influenced Edgar Rice Burroughs. Every single one of them, I swear. But they're all great choices. And Michael also has been grappling with the idea of how do you do a book club? I mean, the difference between a book club and a read-along, I guess, is that a book club is supposed to have more participation. So do you get a Discord? Do you set up a Discord server? Dedicated Voxer just to this subject? I don't know. I don't think he's come up with definitive answers. And I haven't either. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There are plenty of other book clubs, which has led a few people to email me and ask, how on earth am I supposed to do this? Michael didn't pick a long book. And The Prisoner of Zenda is not a long book, and oh my, you will catapult through it. It's such delightful, cheesy trash. it's just so enjoyable. You'll run right through it. I wasn't even thinking, I've read Distant Mirror so many times, I wasn't even thinking that it is an undertaking. It's not something you're going to rocket right through, but it is really good. You won't want to drop it. And I've been getting emails from people saying, well, short or long, there are so many of these book clubs now, and a lot of them are by channels I really like. So how am I supposed to do that? How am I supposed to read all those things? I can get the books, that's not really a problem, but how am I supposed to find the time? And I have a solution to the question of whether or not there are too many book clubs. And that is a simple response that you will vary depending on circumstance. So if you're set for a day of reading A Distant Mirror, and then you realize that you're expected at work, and maybe your boss gives you a call because you're an hour late, what you should say to your boss is, there is no work, there is only BookTube. If you're caterwauling children you never really liked anyway, if they're suddenly clawing at your elbow for you to make them a meal or something like that, simply turn to them and calmly say, there are no children, there is only BookTube. Your wavy-haired lover comes to you and says, how about we put away these boring old ex-librarians and do a little card cataloging in private, if you know what I mean. Simply look at them in a calm, dispassionate face and say, there is no hanky-panky. There is only BookTube. If you do that systematically for every part of your life, suddenly you will find you have the time for all these BookTube clubs. And that time will be well spent. So, there you have it. That's my answer to how you are going to manage all of these BookTube book clubs that are popping up like toadstools. Now you know. No need to thank me, BookTube.